Pretty much right on time. The luncheon session was a tough one to follow, but we'll make every effort to do it. My name is Jay Lair. I'm science director for the Heartland Institute for, 15 or 16 years, and Heartland keeps me on the road pretty much every week of the year somewhere in North America, lecturing on their behalf, teaching dozens of subjects relating to energy, environment, water supply, do a lot in agriculture. And without exception, every group I talk to, I talk on global warming. And it's very encouraging to me that the audiences I talk to, which are real people across America, are all on Lord Monckton's side, on our side. They understand the logic and the simplicity of the arrogance of thinking that man controls the climate. And just to give my talk tomorrow morning a plug, because I'm opposite another panel, I'm going to spend 15 minutes presenting 12 slides and 18 points that are made for public discussion, that are simple for an eighth grader to understand, but they really tell the story. But I do something different that was mentioned a little bit this morning. And that is that I'm less interested in teaching people what they're going to hold and keep as they walk away, but teaching them what to convey. So I've started a new program with all my audiences that if they want to maintain our economy and our freedom, they owe society, their place in society, 2 hours of their time every single month to spread the kind of information we're talking about, and I present them with a very simple way to do it. So it's something that in all your efforts you might think about, not just teaching and convincing people. I like to say I know I'm always talking to the choir, but I'm trying to make choir masters, and we really need to expand our outreach exponentially, and I think that's the way to do it. And my 2 hours a month is really resonating. It's obviously not too much overbearing effort to put on people, but if they want to maintain our economy and our freedoms on this issue, that's basically what they owe. We're really continuing now with more of what we talked about in a session this morning, and we have three outstanding presenters, all of whom I know. And they are Bob Carter and Mahav Kandekar and Dennis Avery. And I'll introduce them all right now and then call them up without ado. Bob Carter is a marine geologist. He's at Cook's University in Australia. That's in Queensland. He used to be the director of the Office of Ocean Drilling in Australia, and I've had the pleasure of speaking in Australia, actually, with Bob when Heartland sent me to Australia for about a 2.5-week lecture tour on global warming. Madhav Kandekar is a scientist from Canada. He spent many, many years with Environment Canada. Environment Canada would be like our EPA if it was a horrible, terrible, unreasonable organization, but it's not. It's a very good organization that does research and oversees regulation. I can't say everything they do is good. I can say everything they do is 10 times better than what the U.S. EPA does. And he has 54 years of experience. He's just 1 year short of mine, I'd like to say. I've been at it for 55 years. And then Dennis Avery, a very good friend, and we all know Dennis here from the book that he wrote with Fred Singer, Unstoppable Global Warming. He'll talk to you about a fascinating new book that he's doing, but I met Dennis 20 years ago through a fabulous book I still recommend that he wrote called Saving the World Through Pesticides and Plastics. It was really an amazing title, but if you want a great read about agriculture and the environment, I highly recommend it. So we'll start off now with Bob Carter.
Can we bring the slides up? What do I do to do that?
Right. Oops. Yeah, it's right to their right. Keeley. Where are you?
While we're doing that, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Jay, for the introduction. I'd just like to start by mentioning I have a book, Climate the Counter Consensus. This is unlike any of the other books here. They are available in truckloads downstairs, and you pay for them. You pay for this, but there's only a very few. And anybody that hasn't got one... Sorry?
And you're good. You're on.
Oh, I'm on. Okay, back here. So anybody that hasn't got one and would like one, the young lady, Christine, on the CFACT desk downstairs in the lobby will be happy to take your name, and for $25 you can have one. But first come, first served, there's only a few. They weigh a lot, and Australia's a long way away. Now, in October 2010, the 5th Heartland climate meeting was held, and it was held in Sydney, Australia. And Jay Lair came down to run that meeting, and as an Australian, of course, I was there. And that makes Jay and I two of the very privileged people at this conference who have actually been to all 7 Heartland conferences. Now, in relating that fact, that's not actually to puff me and Jay. It is to say that the job that Joe Bast and his staff do in organising these conferences is quite outstanding, and the leadership that is provided is appreciated all over the world, Joe. So thank you very much indeed. It's my pleasure and privilege to be here at your invitation again. Okay, misrepresentation of science in the public domain. Richard Feynman, one of the outstanding physicists of the 20th century, explained how the science process worked. The mark of a great scientist is he or she can explain things simply. Feynman was a great scientist. In general, we look for a new law by the following process. First, we guess it. We play games, scientists. It's called a hypothesis. Second, we compute the consequences, and he didn't mean use a computer, he meant use what's between your ears, of the guess to see what would be implied if this law that we guessed is right. And then we compare the result of the computation to nature with experiment or experience, compare it directly with observation to see if it works. It's simple, isn't it? Easy stuff. It's that simple statement that is the key to science. It does not make any difference how beautiful your guess is. It does not make any difference how smart you are, whether you run a NASA section or not, who made the guess, or what his name is. If it disagrees with experiment or observation, it is wrong. Okay, that's the scientific method. Let's use it. Here we go. The hypothesis of the day is that dangerous global warming is caused by human carbon dioxide emissions. Not is climate change happening, Bob. Is dangerous global warming happening caused by human carbon dioxide emissions? And the IPCC has a computer model. You see it here, the black line running up from the left to the right and trending up, and the 2 lesser black lines are error bars. That's their projection, and on the bottom axis you can see 2000 at the left and out to 2020 on the right. And of course, for half that period of time, we have measurements. The faint grey measurements of temperature in the background are what's happening. It's going up and down every year, and you see the plotted temperature trend in red or yellow, and it's going down. So, the hypothesis is more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, not just warming, but dangerous global warming. The facts are more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. How much more? 5% over those years, and 10% since the warming started 15 years ago. That's a lot of carbon dioxide, and there's not only no dangerous warming, there's not only no warming, it's flat or even slightly declining. Okay, so, there's the carbon dioxide increase. That's normative science, and Thomas Kuhn in his famous book would call that's the paradigm. And now what do we do with that normative science? Well, we adjust our hypothesis if we're real scientists, or we invent a new one to take account of the facts which conflict with the current hypothesis. The IPCC doesn't do that. Instead, it patches the hypothesis. And the first thing it says is, well, temperature went down between 1940 and 1979, and the carbon dioxide was rising, so we better have a patch for aerosols. We'll plug a few of those in the model. That's patch 1. Patch 2 is we note when we do the back of the envelope, and they are back of the envelope calculations as to where the carbon dioxide is going, we find that we can't explain half of it. Tom Segelstadt spoke of this morning. So we assume that only half the carbon dioxide we're emitting is being taken up in nature, and the other half is accumulating in the atmosphere. That's a pure assumption, and the evidence for it is very weak. That's patch 2. Patch 3 is, goodness gracious me, we want dangerous warming because the public won't be alarmed otherwise, and we find that if we just use carbon dioxide in our models, we only get about a degree of warming. Got to do something about that. That's patch number 3, that's the water vapour feedback. We have now left Feynman science, we have now left normative science, and we've arrived in the Alice in Wonderland world of post-normal science. And it's about quilting. You have so many patches, you end up with a patchwork quilt. And it's about using consensus and authority to establish your case. It's not about testing hypotheses. It was invented by an Oxford philosopher at the School of Business, Side School of Business at Oxford University, called Jerome Revetz. And if you see halfway down, the new duty of scientists is not to truth, but to something that's called quality. It's similar to rhetoric, and it's the ability to manipulate evidence and present it in such a way as to achieve particular political ends, and you'd have to say the IPCC is brilliant at it. Okay, that's related to another concept, which is postmodern thinking, which didn't start in science. It started in the sociology and arts faculties of the universities in the 1960s and 70s, but it spread to science by the 1990s. And what postmodernism does is it challenges the idea of a neutral observer in any way. It says that all of us are affected by our opinions and our political stance. And alongside feminist critiques of meta-narratives, postmodernist science emphasises local contextual, cultural, language, gender practices. Now, in a sense, that was there before postmodern science, and so in a sense, when you add those two together and science as a whole is infected with both these things, we've now ended up at what, if you look carefully at the cat, it doesn't say what you thought it said, it actually says postmodern. So that's where we're at now. Well, how did this happen? How did science, in the traditional tested empirical sense, get taken over by what I would say is a massive misinformation campaign, and especially now in the global warming arena? And the answer is that massive misinformation campaign. We could talk, any one of us could talk for more than our time on one little bit of the misinformation. It's going on in the schools, it's going on with the lobby groups, it's going on in NASA and other government institutions, and I'm going to show you only what we're getting from our national museums or large museums, which is a place where the public might think they might get some unbiased advice on this matter. One of the greatest museums, some would say the greatest museum of natural history in the world, British Museum London, fine Victorian building. Here's their webpage, global warming, first paragraph, there's absolutely no question the Earth is warming up. You can see why I've headed this Envirotripe. 15 of the 16 hottest years on record have occurred since 1980 and so on. This is kindergarten stuff. It is beyond me that this argument is brought up time and time again. Anybody that knows anything about climate knows that it's warm at the end of the 20th century because we're at a particular position in a natural cycle. It's no more surprising it's warm today than it's surprising that outside it will reach the maximum temperature of the 24-hour diurnal cycle between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That's what nature does. It runs in cycles. They go on. Despite denials from those with a vested interest in polluting, so here's one of Lord Monckton's ad hominem things, the body of evidence now appears irrefutable. I mean, this is just nonsense. This is on the site of a major natural history museum. Human activities are driving the current period of global warming, full stop. In 2001, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies revealed the number of disasters, something Madhav is often talked about, climbed and so on and so forth. Well, since when do we take the Red Cross as our reference for scientific observations? And secondly, the IPCC itself provided, about 4 months ago, a summary statement which said there is no problem. We can't detect any increase in these things. Go to Vienna, Natural History Museum there, a display for school children, which works, as you can see. Global climate changes during the final decades of the 20th century are distinctly outside the historical deviations and seen to be caused by human activities. The first part of that sentence is a lie, the second part is wrong. Go to New Zealand, where they specialise in postmodern brutalist architecture. This is their new national museum. Te Papa is the Maori name. Lovely, psychologically alluring colours for the climate change display. Slap in the middle, the hockey stick. Since the 1850s, there's been a dramatic increase in surface temperature. Of course there has if you fiddle the graph like this. Go to the museum in Sydney, the major national museum there. You walk in the front door. This is just a general display of an expedition they had to the Kermadec Islands. They cannot help themselves in a world increasingly affected by climate change, sea level rise. It is important we get to know as much about marine areas as possible. They can't say they just went out and did some natural history. It has to be linked to global warming, as you can see in the title, persiflage. Get further into the museum, here's their sea level display, a lovely backlit panel, and this is today's sea level. The southern of those two big estuaries with Cronulla written just beneath it is Botany Bay, where Cook landed in 1770. This is at present sea level. You can press the plus and minus on the right and it'll give you different sea levels up to 50 metres. And as you can see, things like the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House are carefully flagged so you can see they're going to get drowned. What might happen, it says, yes, in 30 million years' time. Well, here's somebody that at least has got an architect that designs a new building in sympathy with the very attractive old building next to it. But this is righteous commercial nonsense in the Powerhouse Museum, Sydney. The world's climate scientists agree the Earth is getting hotter. No, they do not. There's an enormous argument about that, and anyway, it depends entirely on the length of the piece of climate string that you look at. The question or the statement is meaningless in a scientific sense. There is strong evidence we are altering the climate by burning coal, oil and gas. That's another technique. That statement is actually true at the local level. But nobody reads it at the local level. That is read as at the global level, at which stage it is completely untrue. Further in this display, we come across this, which is keep an eye on your emissions. These are little calculators as to how much you emit in all the things you like doing. If you like eating meat, flying, emailing, renovating, driving, buying a car, watching TV, use your dishwasher, here's the sum. And if you get into the food, energy from fossil fuels is involved in growing, processing and all the rest of it. 1 glass of milk. We reduce our impact by choosing locally grown foods that are in season. A lovely study a couple of years ago showed that New Zealand lamb flown to the United Kingdom has a smaller carbon dioxide footprint. It's not a carbon footprint. Has a smaller carbon dioxide footprint than does Welsh lamb grown in the Welsh borderlands. Bread, tofu, beef, chicken, lamb, an egg. Is it any wonder our kids are getting stewed up about all this? CSIRO, our leading scientific agency, producing junk science, just like NASA. Almost unanimous agreement that global warming seriously threatens our way of current life. There just isn't, and that it's being caused by human activity. We could argue that. Models, that's right, here are the models they show. They're becoming increasingly accurate as scientists gather more data. As all of you will know, there's a lot of chat on the web at the moment, or on the blogs, about the astonishing fact that the climate models have not reduced their range of variation, not become more accurate in the last 25 years. This is a total, blatant lie. Well, how come? What's driving this misinformation campaign? There are many causes. Marxism, deep green environmentalism, guilt. Our guilt complex is beautifully exploited, but most of all, money. This is a friend of mine who's a senior economic geologist. What I learned in my 5-year stint on a national funding agency and then on a research planning committee was that fear sells now, as Edward Munch is depicting here, rather than fund fundamental research 50 years into the future. On the 2 occasions that I served on advisory committees to our National Geological Survey, I had to educate them the only way they would survive either benign government neglect and or huge budget cuts was to get into the hazard business. Bottom right, there's no greater hazard than a volcano erupting. Earthquakes, tsunamis, unstable glacial collapse, so on and so forth. If they marketed it right, the Geological Survey could be out there mapping and doing basic geophysics for decades to save us from all these hazards. No problems, mate. He's dead right, and it's not just the Geological Surveys, it's every interest group on the planet has found a way to make money, taxpayer money, out of this scam. What can we do about it? This is not necessarily a solution, but I'd like to remind you all that the US is normally ahead of the rest of the world. And in 1967, Arthur Katranovitz at Dartmouth College, a professor of engineering, suggested the concept of a science court. The protagonists would be 2 or more. I mean, it might be more because you might have the EPA, for example, as one of the protagonists, as well as 2 other people arguing a case. Prepare presentation cases. Jury of science peers, here's the evidence. Critical point. The science peers must be acknowledged expert scientists in fields different to the case under consideration. And you get rid of all this mates stuff. Additionally, to be considered is whether the jury should be required to make unanimous recommendations, whether the recommendations should be binding, and if so, on whom, President or Congress. Finally, how to avoid continual vexatious cases by environmental NGOs. You can be sure they'll come, and others. Now, I don't say this is the solution, but I do say we've got to look for solutions, and it is the case that we've been using this sort of legal justice system for many thousand years. So it bears thinking about. If President Johnson thought seriously enough about it, he set up a presidential task force on this issue, and he did, and the recommendations were only just defeated, then I think it's time to look again at the science court. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Bob. Now, Madhav Kandahar.